Hello and welcome back to the third season of The Healthy Practice from Right Up. I'm your host Ellie and I'm delighted to have you here with us once again. This season we're going to be doing things a little differently and take things back to basics. We've been paying attention to our Right Up users and getting in tune with the issues that mean the most to you. Our first topic of the season is a hot topic that I know affects so many Right Up users, healthcare professionals and more or less anyone these days, and that's burnout. So why do we burn out? How can we prevent it? And more importantly, how can we stop it from happening again? To break this down, I was joined by the wonderful Katie Maycock. Katie is a professional coach and founder of Get Your Shit Together and Gyst Wellbeing. She runs corporate workshops and she also offers one-to-one coaching. Katie is a keynote speaker and is a passionate educator on all things burnout. Katie has experienced burnout herself a couple of times and she shared some fascinating insights into the 6 stages of burnout and what we can do to stop it from happening. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on The Healthy Practice today, Katie. It's so wonderful to have you here.
I'm so excited about being here. Can't wait.
Oh, good. Yeah, we're really excited to have you. So let's get straight into it then. What is burnout and why is it different from stress?
That's a really good question. So essentially, if you look at the description of burnout, well, this is what I call burnout. It is physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion from prolonged stress. If you look at the World Health Organization, they pop a little caveat in saying it's only from in the workplace, but I will openly say I'll go against the World Health Organization, if I may, because essentially the only precursor to burnout is prolonged stress. So the way that it differs is that burnout's just the outcome from prolonged stress. That's it. If you're under stress for a prolonged period of time, and we're not saying like days or weeks or anything like that, we're saying like months and potentially years, you're going to burn out. So that's the very big differentiation piece there. So it's just that prolonged stress that you can't get out of.
Yeah, it's interesting about the World Health Organization say in the workplace, because I mean, I guess when you think about burnout, you do automatically think at work, but that isn't the case, really.
No, like there's parental burnout, carer burnout, kids are getting burnt out. So obviously like university students are getting burnt out. So it's not that. I'm going to hazard a guess. What they've done is they've taken a body of work from a gentleman who did a whole bunch of work on burnout, who originally coined the term burnout in 1976. So it's been around for a while. It just took us a little bit to catch up. He was he was a psychiatrist who would go into the workplace. His name is Dr. Herbert Freudenberger. The name just rolls off the tongue. But he was a psychiatrist that was going into organizations. He didn't just focus on burnout. He was looking at addiction and gambling and things like that. And he came across what we now know as burnout. And he was seeing these like type A professionals, these really big workaholic kind of people, these essentially young people, like, 40-year-olds who were highly successful, highly motivated, highly driven. And then it was kind of like out of nowhere, they physically, mentally, and emotionally could no longer do the job. And so that's where it came from, because he was looking at the workplace. I think that was a transition over, but I think it is a massive discredit to other people, because you can take one person, put them in the same workplace, and they might get burnt out, not just solely because of work, but solely because of everything that's happening in their world around them. So you take like women, for instance, burn out at a higher rate than men. Things like that. It's just things that we have to pay attention to, because it's not fair to just say it's just the workplace. And it puts a lot of pressure on workplaces to change an environment that might not actually be causing the burnout.
Yeah, of course. It could be everything else that's going on. So like you said, caring, unpaid labour that women perhaps are doing more than men, all that stuff that's going on in the background. Yeah, and the combination of those can lead to burnout. That makes total sense. You've been really open about your experience of burnout. So can you share what happened to you? What happened to you leading up to it?
So this is a really good question. I'll try and not go off on too much of a tangent, because it does sort of start young. But essentially, when I look back now at all the reasons why I burnt out. So I burnt out twice in my 20s. And I always say I was really fortunate to burn out in my 20s, because I've now been able to build better foundations in my 30s. But essentially what happened was I set up a business when I was still at university. I set up my first business, and that business went really, really well. I was able to scale it. We got it into like pretty much I was selling diet plans in gyms. and I was able to scale it through a national gym. And that was really, really fun. I made a terrible decision and made a terrible mistake in my 20s. I had no business acumen. Well, I obviously had some business acumen, but I made a couple of really bad mistakes. And ended up losing the business overnight. During that time, though, I was still at university, so I was creating these really unhealthy habits. So I would work nonstop. I was working like 16-hour days. While still going to university, so I was working weekends. I was working nonstop. So I would go to uni. I was doing a double degree as well, coming out of uni, going straight into work, and it was absolutely nuts. But during that time, I created really unsustainable habits that then led when I ended up going into corporate. So I ended up working in recruitment. If you've ever worked in recruitment, you'll understand that's a really high-pressured, high-stressed industry. And so I went in there, and I was 23, 24 at the time. I was quite young. I looked like I was about 15 as well, so that didn't also help. But I also went into an organization where I was one of the youngest people and one of the youngest women. And people had been in recruitment for like 10 plus years. So when I went into recruitment, I'm somebody that's like, I'm a bit of an underdog. Like I will, if you think I can't do the job, I will put everything in to be successful. And I found out after a couple of months that people had bets on me when I was going to quit and how I wasn't going to be successful. And I was like, oh, you've lit a fire up my butt. So I went for it. And those first, that first year in recruitment, I just went for it. I was working really long hours, again, using the unsustainable habits that I learned in my first business, and was working around the clock, putting so much pressure on myself, just really, really going for it. And yeah, I was really successful. Yeah, I made, salesperson of the year, rookie of the year. I outbilled people that had been in the industry for like 10 years. Like I was really proud of myself. But then what happened was I actually went on a break, and when I went on that break, I couldn't get out of bed for 4 days. And I was so unwell. I ended up having digestive health issues. I ended up having inflammatory issues. And when I'm saying inflammatory issues, I'm saying like my joints would swell up. I remember one day I woke up and my left hand was 3 times the size of itself, and I couldn't clench a fist for 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I was in and out of doctors because I couldn't digest food. I had really bad like IBS. I ended up getting diagnosed with functional inflammatory bowel disease. And I'm like, that's fun. I don't know if I'm functioning, but thank you for saying I'm functioning. Righto.
Don't feel like it.
Don't feel like it. Just saying. And that went on for months and months. And this is before the World Health Organization said it was a diagnosable syndrome. So I was going to the doctors and I'm like, what the heck is wrong with me, with like cold sores on my face, not being able to digest food, swollen hands, not able to walk up and down stairs. And they're just like, maybe try not stressing. And I'm like, at this stage, you've also got to take into consideration, I saw stress as a driving force. I saw it as, you put me under any stressful situation, I will perform at my highest. And although that's not untrue, it wasn't sustainable. It was really, really unsustainable. And so what happened was, the first time I burnt out, I had to leave my job. I took 8 months off, got back to baseline, went back into the same job, but ended up moving into states. So I was living in Melbourne, ended up moving to Sydney, got a promotion in the same company, and within 6 months I had done the exact same thing. After that second time, that was when I really understood I had a really toxic relationship with stress. I used it as a fuel, and I never understood that, you know what, yes, it's okay to use pressure as a fuel for short periods of time. It's not my only source of fuel. So that was something that really hit me quite hard. And that was what really happened.
And you say, so you were confused about basically what was wrong with you. So you were going to the doctors, they were diagnosing something that it wasn't. And when was it then that you realized, actually, I think that was burnout? I assume it was like after the fact, when you look back, that's when you realized it was burnout.
Yeah. So I was 27, and I'll never forget this day at the back of my hand. I remember waking up in the morning and I knew I had a cold sore. And when I say I had cold sores, I'm saying like I would get them aggressively. Like if you've ever seen an Australian 50-cent coin, if you've not seen a 50-cent coin, just Google it. They're giant. And I would wake up with cold sores that size on my face. So it was a really big thing. And I remember waking up and I was like, I knew I had a cold sore, and I was like, oh, let's go and inspect the damage. That's how I measured my cold sores. That's how frequently I was getting them. I was like, let's inspect the damage. Like, where are we at today? And I looked in the mirror, and this cold sore went from the bottom of my lip down my jawline, down to my jaw, up my jawline, went around my ear and into my ear. So like a quarter of my face was a cold sore. And in that moment, two thoughts went through my head. The first thought was like, holy shit, I look like Shrin Baratheon from Game of Thrones. If anyone's watched Game of Thrones, that'll make sense to you. If you haven't,
yes,
just Google Shrin Baratheon. And the second thought was, I really can't keep this up, because I was 27 and I felt like I was an 80-year-old woman. I'd never felt healthy, and I never understood why. And at that stage, my diet was perfect. I was going to the gym 6 days a week. I was doing everything that everyone was telling you to do to be healthy, but it was actually ruining me physically. And at that stage, we didn't really call it burnout. We just definitely saw it as something that was different. But at this stage, I was struggling with anxiety. I couldn't concentrate. Literally, I would go into meetings and I could see people's mouths moving. I could hear noises, but I'd walk out of the meeting going, I have no idea what was just said. I have no idea what actions I meant to do in that. I was unable to read emails and understand what they were saying to me. It was so overwhelming that I realized it was something really, really wrong. And that was kind of where I started. That was 10 years ago now. And it's taken me a few years to really undo everything and really understand that that was truly burnout. But I think the time when I knew that I had a poor relationship with stress, and I knew that stress was causing my physical health issues. I have a double degree in nutrition and advanced physiology, so I should have known better. And then when I realized what was going on, I was like, yeah, this is absolutely stress. And that was where I kind of started my journey, and how I am where I am now, and also now how I help people. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so do you know how big a problem burnout is? Because now that it's recognized and now that it's been studied, I assume we must know roughly how big a problem it is.
So, yeah, it's really interesting, because the minute the World Health Organization, let's just put this into perspective, right? The World Health Organization came out, there was a diagnosable syndrome in 2019. November 2019, I'm pretty sure it was November 2019. What happened the next year, right? It was COVID. So there was a massive spotlight on burnout. So I think if we go back to 2020 or 2021, there was this, they came out with the statistics that 21% of UK workers were burnt out. And then you go to 2022, that went to 46%, or 2023 or something like that, was 46% of the workforce is burnt out. Now in 2024, they're saying that 79% of UK workers have burnt out. We're not saying they're currently burnt out. We're just saying they have burnt out. That's just 4 years. But what's really interesting is if you go back to 2018, Perkbox did a study that said 79% of the UK workforce was feeling so stressed out that it was impacting their ability to perform at work. So I don't really think you can ignore the 79% of 2018 of UK workers feeling so stressed out it was impacting their work, to now saying 79% of the workforce have burnt out. And I think we're only 4 or 5 years into this diagnosis. We're only really into this properly studying what it is. I think we're going to be more shocked at the little pockets of it, and I think we're going to see this is going to be an issue moving forward. I can't see this going away anytime soon.
No, absolutely not. Certainly not if 79% of us have been burnt out in our workplace or otherwise. That's incredible. That's an incredible number. Yeah. And actually, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me, given our sort of relationship to stress and how it's almost glamorized to an extent sometimes at work.
It's also kind of just ignored.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, oh, it is what it is. And I get that. And here's the thing. There's a part of me that's like, yeah, we've got to normalize stress, because it is a part of everyday life. So we should acknowledge it. We should understand where it's coming from. But what we've really got to do is start putting proper action plans in place to actually help manage stress. I don't remember being sat down saying, hey, this is what stress is. This is how it feels. And this is what it's going to do to you. And this is what you can do to combat it. We never get taught that. We kind of just said, hey, stress is part of everyday life. Keep on going. Keep cracking.
Yeah. Yeah. And almost, I don't know if this is true for everyone, but almost like, if you can't handle stress, then you shouldn't be here, sort of thing. So you kind of have to deal with stress, regardless of how everybody's different, but it feels like that, doesn't it? And I think our relationship to stress and our attitude to stress definitely needs to change or alter somehow.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that hit me, and I will be really honest about this, I really thought, like, I used to pride myself on my ability to perform under stress, prided
Mm,
myself under working under pressure. Like, that was sort of like, I made that a part of my personality. So it
mm,
was when I burnt out the second time, and everyone was saying, yeah, it's because you're not dealing with stress properly. I was kind of like, yeah, but what do you mean? Like, you put me in a really stressful situation, sink or swim, I will always swim. I will always swim. It was a massive hit to my pride. It was a massive hit to how I perceived myself. And I think there's this conversation that we need to have where, especially in high pressured industries, and I feel like we're just living in a high pressured world right now, to be honest. But we go into
yeah.
high pressured industries, it's like, if you can't hack it, then leave. It's like, you're like, companies that say that and managers that say that, you are losing some really good high performers. And it's not because they can't handle the pressure. It's simply they don't have the right resources to continue working under that pressure. And the minute we understand that, the better we can create environments where we are able to work under pressure and deal with stress better, rather than just
Yeah.
going, oh, it is what it is. You know, I've got IBS, but everyone's got IBS. Oh, I've got this really weird this really weird vague health issue. Like, doctors can't just, can't diagnose me, so therefore I mustn't have a problem. When people are truly suffering with really severe health issues, but because they're so vague and there's not a clear cut diagnosis,
Mm.
people are going on suffering, and we've normalized it. It's just
Yeah.
baffling
Oh,
to
we
me.
have. Absolutely, we have. And most of our listeners, they're healthcare professionals and
Mhm.
therapists. And burnout is really quite a common thing in that industry.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think they're particularly at risk of burnout?
Because if you look at what these people have had to deal with over the years, they're dealing with really high stress. There's a lot of lack of support and resources to these industries and to these people. And there's more and more people needing these services, right? There's more
Mm.
and more people needing these services. So there's going to be, in my personal opinion, I would be saying that they're overworked because there's so many people needing their support. Typically, therapists are also very empathetic beings. They want to help people. And so
Mm.
they're just trying to fill their calendars in to support people because there's so many people that need this support.
Mm.
But they also are lacking resources and sort of that support that they need to make sure that they can do their job effectively.
Yeah.
That would be my
Yeah,
perception.
absolutely. And it goes back to that caring as well, that caring
Hmm.
burnout that you can get along with that. And a lot of our listeners as well, they're private practitioners. So not only have they got all that, they've got the running a business side as well.
Yeah.
So it's like a double whammy. And
Yeah.
so what are the signs that we should be looking out for? What kind of things mean burnout's coming?
Yeah. So look, burnout's the destination, right? There's a journey that precedes it. So understanding the 6 stages of burnout is incredibly important. So I'll just run through them because I think it can be really, really helpful. So the first stage of burnout is what we would consider excitement. Bear with me with this one. But essentially, what happens with the excitement phase is, let's say someone's taken on a new project, they've taken on something's happened in their workplace, maybe you've set up your first business, whatever it is, and you're really excited. So there's a lot of energy behind you, you're mentally doing really, really well, emotionally you're just super excited and you're really gung-ho about doing it. At that stage, what happens is people typically change their habits. So they might sacrifice having a good night's sleep because they want to work on this project or whatever it is. Or maybe they have to sacrifice their sleep because there's something that's going on that they needed to do that with. They stop
Mm.
going exercising, they stop, eating healthy, they stop giving themselves downtime. And so there's a whole bunch of habits that they start doing that are unsustainable. But what happens is they then get that positive reinforcement from being successful. So that positive reinforcement then drives them to continue working under that way, because in their head, like, this is how I have to be successful. So then the second stage is what we would call working harder. At this stage, you're still able to perform, you're still able hitting your targets, achieving what you want to achieve, but you're physically, mentally, and emotionally having to put more energy into it. So it's not coming as naturally, it's not coming as easily. You're not in that, flow state. So you're having to put more effort in. And you'll typically see at this stage, those late nights are catching up with you. So you might be drinking more caffeine, having more teas, having more coffees, whatever it is. But you're still performing. No one's really noticing any changes in you. They've just noticed that maybe you're just a bit busy, right?
Yeah.
Then the third stage is when the cracks start to show, as I like to say. This is the stage where we call it frustration. And this is when there's massive behavioral changes going on. So physically, you're quite tired. You're waking up groggy. I usually say at this stage, if you're somebody that is waking up groggy, but you're going to bed very wide, you're usually at stage 3. Emotionally, you're really, when we look at the emotional, this is where the behavioral changes kick in. So maybe you've gone from being cool, calm, and collected to being quite short-fused, quite frustrated, or easy to frustrate, and maybe you're lashing out. On the other side to that, maybe you're somebody that was very bubbly, very outgoing, very engaged, very, involved in a lot of things, whether that's at work and outside of work as well, and maybe you're starting to withdraw. That's a pretty big sign. You might flip between the two. Like, I know people that flip between the two as well. But also what's happening here is mentally, and when we're talking about mentally in this context, we're talking about the cognitive function. You're having to put more effort in to cognitively do the same tasks. So you're making more mistakes, your performance is starting to dip at this stage. And people outside are going to recognize, whether that's your friends and families or your colleagues or your boss, whoever it is, right? So that's stage 3. If you then don't resolve that stage, you then fall into stage 4, which is what I would call illness and anxiety. So stress has a really profound impact on our physical health. It lowers our immune system, it dysregulates our inflammatory system, it lowers our ability to digest food, all those kind of things, right? So you're going to start having those physical health issues, whether that's just really massive fatigue, vague health issues. Maybe you have more specific health issues, but it's really going to take a massive impact to your physical well-being. On the other side to that, you might be starting to struggle with anxiety. So it's like you've been under stress for such a prolonged period of time, you're becoming overwhelmed, and it's increasing that likelihood of anxiety, panic attacks, and things like that. I'm not saying everyone gets panic attacks at this stage, but it is something that can happen. This is the stage where people start to seek help, but a lot of the times they're like, well, of course I'm stressed out. Like, I've got this physical health issue or whatever it is. It's like they feel like it's come out of nowhere, but realistically, it's all the stress that's been popped on them before. And then what happens is it's a hop, skip, and jump to stage 5, which is apathy. Now, apathy is I would say apathy is one of the worst symptoms of burnout, because essentially you've gone from being very motivated, very driven, very goal-orientated, very engaged, feeling like a valued person in the workplace, all that kind of stuff, to just simply not caring. And it's not because you don't care, it's just you don't have the capacity to care. And that's quite painful for a lot of people. And if we look at your listeners and they're, private practitioners and their therapists, that's a really terrifying place to be, because you've built a whole career around caring about other people, really caring about supporting these people. And what you wake up, you do sometimes feel like you've just woken up and you're like, I can't care. And there's this sort of like, it's kind of a severing of something to do with you. So that's stage 5. And then obviously stage 6 is full-blown burnout. So you're physically really drained. Mentally, as I was talking about before, you are unable to take in information and make it something meaningful for you to action. So everything becomes a little bit confusing. You are very forgetful. And the forgetfulness can be quite scary for a lot of people as well. They can think there's something else going on. Emotionally, you're kind of flipping between anxiety and apathy. Because what can happen with the apathy phase, and I'm just going to pop this in here. People get to the apathy phase and then they take a break. So whether that's a week off, 2 weeks off, a month off, whatever it is, and they start to just feel a little bit better. Like, oh, I feel a bit better. No, I really love what I'm doing. They go back and do the exact same thing again, and then it's real quick before they
burn
get
out
back
again.
They get right there again. So that's really some of the big symptoms that I see when it comes to burnout. And I think it's been something that's really interesting. When I look at the symptoms, a lot of them are quite normalized, like anxiety. Like, a lot of people are struggling with anxiety. Like apathy, it's like, yeah, of course I don't care about my job because of whatever reason, or I don't care about X, Y, and Z. Like, a lot of people talk about cynicism, and I'm like, well, that's just the apathy part. And so I think it's, we've really got to be aware of those symptoms.
I didn't realize there were so many stages before you got to that point, and it's really, really helpful to know. So, I mean, stage 3 is where you really want to be listening and looking and listening, isn't it? And drawing back. So if you are past that stage and you're really going towards burnout, or you're already there, who can you turn for help? How do you get that help?
So, I mean, I feel for therapists because I would say a lot of people need that support from therapists
Yeah.
as well, because essentially what you need to do when it comes to burnout is you need to look at your habits. But the thing is, as well, you've got to really think about your belief system. So you've got to really break down how you perceive your stress, how you perceive yourself in those situations. So that's one thing. So first things first, if you are working and you need to be signed off from work, go to the doctor. They're going to get you a doctor's note, whether you get a couple of weeks off or a month off, whatever it is. Will that solve your burnout? No, it just make you feel better. It's like a band-aid. But what you need to do within that time is do the work. So seek a therapist, seek somebody that's working in this space that really understands burnout, and break down what habits, what behaviors, what actions got you to that burnout, and really understand what you can do about it. So really undoing those belief systems, really undoing how you react to stress, changing your relationship to stress. Will it happen overnight? Absolutely not. This is a long-term thing that you've got to work on. I mean, I'm 10 years deep and I'm still having to figure this stuff out still.
Yeah.
But I think it's being able to really have that support network when it comes to either a professional therapist, you know, something like that. I think that's really, really important, or having a coach, whatever you need to get out of that. But somebody that knows burnout, that can support you and help you change your relationship with stress, is the most important person to have. But yeah, get that sign off from work if you need it though.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And I guess my next question was how do we recover from burnout? But I guess that's how we recover. It's changing how we look at ourselves, changing how we deal or our relationship to stress, and then trying to unpick that. And I guess if you do work with a therapist, that's probably the best way to do it, isn't it?
It's probably the easiest thing to do, because your therapist is going
Yeah.
to be able to go, look,
Guide
these
you.
habits, these habits weren't sustainable, were they? Like, these belief systems is how you created those habits, and these actions aren't supporting that, and helping you really undo that toxic relationship you have, which is really important.
So we kind of touched on this earlier, but I wondered if you've got any statistics on this. Who is most likely to get burned out?
Women. So the most burnt out people in the workplace are women, and I think it was something like a 46% higher likelihood than men. Don't hold me on that. I will look at the statistics and I'll come back to you, but I remember 46% as well was up there,
Yeah.
but or maybe 47%, something like that. But women, and you know, we can always look at their antidote. Oh, well, maybe it's like, you know, whatever it is. No, it's just women typically take on that unpaid labor. They work full time. Things have massively changed in the workplace in 50 plus years. So yeah, it's women that are more likely to burn out. Not saying men don't. That's not fair to say. But,
No,
you know.
of course, no. But women are more likely. Is there any age or job that's more likely, or is there not really anything on that?
No, there is. Healthcare workers. Healthcare workers
Yes.
are more likely to burn out than anybody. Groups seem to be that Gen Z, millennial, Gen X age. Not saying, you know, the older generations don't, but there seems to be more. We're seeing such crazy numbers of Gen Z burning out, and that's why I know it's not a workplace issue, because they're just entering the workplace. So, and we're not, you know, seeing they going, oh, they're not resilient. No, the world we live in is vastly different, and it's harder for them. In a way. But women typically between 34 and 45 are the ones that typically burn out. My clients are all around mid 40s, and they are men. I'm not saying I don't work with women, I do work with women, but I do find the 34 to 45-year-old women that come to me, 45 to 55-year-old men that come to see me as well. So they're seeming to be the ages that that are there, and the statistics are saying that as well. Other industries outside of healthcare, I think a lot of like sales and marketing roles are going to cause that stress as well. So those types of industries.
Yeah. Do you know what the cost of burnout would cost businesses in the UK, for example, or a private practice or any business? How much is it costing us?
Yeah, so this is a massive one. So Gallup came out, I think it was about 2 years ago, they came out and said for every single person that's burnt out in your organization, it's costing £3,500 per £10,000 of salary. So if we put that into context, I'm going to do really quick math, and I'm not saying that everyone's on this, but you can just do the division if you need to. So if you've got 100 people in your organization and they're on, let's say, £36,000 a year, and you're thinking about how much that's going to cost that your company. So 35% of those salaries is going to be lost to burnout, which includes productivity, presenteeism, absenteeism, and all that kind of stuff. So you're looking at like millions of pounds every single year simply lost for people that are burnt out. And the other thing that's really interesting is the impact of having it when you're a business owner, because if you're a burnt out business owner and you have employees, your employees are more at risk of burning out as well. And then you've got to think about what that means for your practice, what that means for your business as well. You're losing clients, you're not able to do those sales. So that impact is widespread across businesses. And of course, yes, it's a human problem, but finances is also incredibly important, and understanding how that's impacting a business and that as well, and all the things that sort of come into play with that is massive. Like, I go into companies all the time and we talk about the impact of burnout on their organization, and yes, we talk about the people, but it's the financial state, right? If you're losing millions of pounds every single year because of something like burnout, you need to make that your focus. So yeah, it's massive, absolutely massive.
Huge. Mm-hmm. And so some pressure when it comes to work is really good.
Yeah.
And we need to stay on track. We need to stay motivated. But where do we draw the line? So what should we be paying attention to when it comes to work pressure and stress?
So when it comes to pressure and stress, I think it's really important to differentiate between the two. So pressure essentially is working towards a goal, target, and a deadline, knowing it's completely determined by your own behaviors, actions, habits, all that kind of jazz. Whereas stress, on the other hand, is the exact same thing, but you're lacking a resource. So, for instance, there's 5 resources that, don't get me wrong, there's 5 resources, the main categories, and there's going to be little parts underneath them as well. But the 5 resources you need to keep working well under pressure is energy. So here's the thing with pressure. It's extremely addictive to a lot of people. So, because you achieve a lot, you feel elated, there's a lot of dopamine that goes into it, adrenaline, all that kind of jazz. So it can feel really, really good, and it can be addictive. And so a lot of people try and keep tapping into that, but it's something that you can't keep tapping into. It's not sustainable because you're going to drain your energy. So that's one thing. You can't work under pressure 100% of the time and expect to keep performing. The second one is time. Time is a really, really important one. And I know I'm going to put a caveat here. I know a lot of people, I am one of these people that leaves everything to the last second because I like that pressure and I'm more likely to perform better under that pressure. But if you consistently do that and you keep taking on more work and you don't have time to do the tasks that you need to do, that's going to cause a whole bunch of stress and you're going to end up burning out. So that's the second one. You need enough time to be able to achieve what you need to achieve. And if we look at a whole human being, this is where we've really got to understand. I'm going on a tangent and I apologize, but we've really got to understand this part about time. The way we've utilized our time in the last 30 years has dramatically changed. And yes, that is because of technology, right? Think about what you do when you first wake up in the morning. You probably check your emails, go on social media, read text messages, something to do with work, right? And yeah, maybe you have no intention to reply to those messages or write that email, but you've essentially started work the minute you check your emails. I say that to all my clients. The minute you check your emails, you're starting work. And then what's the last thing you do at night? You probably check your emails, make sure you're not going to miss anything so you feel prepared for the next day. So we're working a huge amount more hours. And what that's leading to is less time focusing on us, less time filling up our cup, less time focusing on downtime, less time focusing on our families. That's having a huge impact when it comes to stress and burnout. So really paying attention to how you're utilizing your time and what you're actually doing, and having really strict boundaries on your time is incredibly important. So that's the second piece. The third one is skills. So skills is an interesting one. So when we talk about skills, you need the right tools to be able to do your job. You need to make sure you have everything you need to make sure you can do your job. If you do not have that, you will be under stress and you're most likely to burn out. However, there's another caveat with this. If you are in a role and you do not feel challenged, you do not feel excited, you do not feel like you are learning a new skill, you're not developing, you're also going to go sort of on the opposite side of pressure, where you're going to be demotivated and sort of be really checked out. So that's something to pay attention to. You need the right amount of pressure and challenges to make sure you can develop a new skill. So that's the third one. The fourth one, which will come to no surprise to anybody, is support. So if you lack any type of support, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's at home, whether that's with families, friends, whatever it is, you're going to fall into that stress side. And the final one is what I would call reward and recognition. So if you're working really, really hard and you're getting absolutely zero reward from that, so whether that's positive reinforcement, even just an acknowledgement, which kind of falls into that recognition, that's going to cause stress as well. Because why would you be doing something where you get absolutely nothing from it, right? There's no reward. Yeah. There's no nothing, whether that's financial reward or whether it's just a positive reinforcement or a recognition that you're doing a good job. And I think if we think about parents, I think that's why a lot of parents can feel burnt out, because sometimes there's not as much of a recognition that you're doing a great job. So they're the 5 resources you absolutely need to make sure that you can work well under pressure. If you lack one or more of those resources for a prolonged period of time, you're just going to burn out. So being able to recognize that is incredibly important.
That's an incredible answer. Thank you so much, Katie. So good. So I've been thinking about this, and it's obviously hard to break this habit because, like you said, you fell into burnout twice, and I'm an overthinker. I know loads of perfectionists as well. You can go back to your old habits like so easily. Yeah. So how do you stop burnout happening again? How do you make sure that you don't end up in that boat again?
Oh God, the amount of times I've been I burnt out fully twice, and I've been very close to 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th time. Do you know what I mean? So it's something that it's an everyday thing, right? You've got to monitor yourself every day. It's so easy to fall back into burnout because so many people have got unsustainable habits. And so it's easy to be like, well, if someone's doing it, then I should do it. And oh, that's not good enough, so I'm going to keep working at it. And the narrative around work has been toxic for many years. You have to become so self-aware of yourself to recognize where you're at. And so I get every single person that I speak to, I do this in public speaking talks, I do this with my clients. I say to people, you have to start checking in with yourself every single day and break it down into the 3 components. Break it down into how am I physically doing? How am I emotionally doing? Where's my mental, where's my cognition at today? And if you find it easier to rate it from 0 to 10, do that. I actually say do that because it helps focus your mind. So from 0 to 10, 10 being I'm absolutely fantastic, I'm running on all cylinders, and 0 being I'm completely checked out, I'm really not coping at all. Rate yourself in those 3 categories. And if you're a 7 or below, then you know something's kind of up. Instead of focusing on what that thing is, ask yourself what's one thing I need right now to help me get closer to that 10. That can really help let you know where you're at currently. And you've got to be really, really honest with yourself. You can't BS yourself. So that's the first thing. But the second question, which is always looking, what's one thing I need right now to get me closer to that 10? You're looking at what habit or what resource you need right this second to make sure that you can get through that day. And I say keep a journal of it. Just write down every single day. Be aware of what's going on. And that way you can keep on track of it. And I've had clients that have been at a 5 consistently for like a month. I'm like, what's going on here? And when we dig deep into it, it's understanding, okay, well, like this is what's going on, and I haven't put this habit in place, and it's just really breaking it down that easily. But you have to be so self-aware of how you're feeling and where you're at.
We know that running your own practice is a rewarding path to take, but we're also aware of the pressures you as a business owner may be under. Burnout can happen to any of us, and that's why it's important to have a solid network around you. At WriteUp, we've designed our software to be as intuitive and efficient as possible, helping you draft client notes quickly, facilitate cashless payments, offer video consultations, and so much more. We're here to do the admin work for you so you can get on with what you're good at, helping your clients. Join over 13,000 clinicians today who are taking ownership of their practice with WriteUp. Go to writeup.com, that's WRITEUPP.com. Now let's get back to Katie. So before I let you go, I'm going to ask you a question. When it comes to lessons around burnout, do you practice them in your own life? So do you do the journal and do you rate yourself every day? Yeah.
I do, but I don't write it down anymore. I just sort of sit there. Like I'm self-aware enough to know like this is where I'm at. This is what I need. I know I'm lacking this. Do I have that voice inside, that drill sergeant voice in my head that tries to overshadow that? 100% yes. But I now recognize that voice is usually very tied to my stress and burnout. And it's usually that negative voice that like leads to imposter syndrome, perfectionism, negative self-talk, you know, that punishing yourself to get stuff done. I recognize that's usually when I'm under stress. So usually I'm like, okay, hang on a second. If that, you know, asshole voice is coming in, like, what's going on in my life that I need to really focus on? And a lot of the times it's just I need a bit of a step back and I've been too involved in whatever I'm doing. But yeah, I do it every day. And I think one of the biggest things that was really helpful for me, and I don't know how many people are going to relate to this, but I really had to unsubscribe to all the toxic positivity and toxic health practices that people kept on spewing out, which is, you know, like work out every single day and, you know, meditate and all of that without really engaging in it. So like I used to go to the gym 6 days a week. I used to meditate like 20 minutes in the morning before I went to work. I wrote a gratitude list, but I didn't engage in them. I was using them as a tick box exercise, and a lot of people get stuck into that, and that would cause me a lot of stress. So now I just kind of listen to my body. I'm like, what do we want to do today? Do we want to go for a walk? Do we want to like go smash at the gym? Like, what do we want to do? And really like meditate, but sometimes my meditation is in different forms. Like I'm going to go for a walk without my phone. Without any noise. I'm just going to embrace where I'm at and just really understand that, you know, some of the stuff that's out there, you don't have to do it all. Just find the one thing that makes you feel the best and really unsubscribe to toxic positivity.
Totally, because you can be told to do all these things and that just creates another stress. You're like, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this to look after myself, and I've got my job. Yeah, totally agree with that. So thank you so much for being here today. Where can our listeners find you and follow more of your work? So
if you want to, you can follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I post up a lot of stuff. So it's just Katie Maycock. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm getting my Instagram game up. I promise you I'm on Instagram a little bit more. So there's more information coming on there. So that's getyourshittogether.io. You can read blogs on my gystwellbeing.com website. So I've got loads and loads of blogs for if you're a business owner or somebody that works in leadership. There's loads of blogs on there and loads of information on there. So check out that website. Check out my Instagram because I'm building it up. I'm building it up, folks. And LinkedIn is where I'm really the most active.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on The Healthy Practice, Katie.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
And that's the end of today's episode. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Katie for joining me today. It was such a fascinating conversation. Remember to check out writeup.com for all your practices software solutions and to start your free 30-day trial. No payment details are required. Thanks for listening to the Healthy Practice podcast. If you enjoyed it, please do leave us a review. It helps more than you might think. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.